WESN.
From the Sister Isle, Talking Point once again comes to you on the eve of New Year's Eve. And a lot has happened, of course, between the last time we were on the air and now. One of the things that I just wanted to mention briefly is the fact that once again, we have someone, whether an athlete or an artist, do something in their own capacity, on their own initiative, something that hopefully would give all of us a sense of pride and joy. Joshua Regrello did 31 hours continuously with 2 25-minute breaks to, I believe, set a Guinness World Record of continuously playing the pan. It's a feat that was heralded by a minister or two, and I'm sure by members of the public. And I think it once again highlights what art, I would also say sport, but of course this example is what art means for the country, what art could do for the country. And I always say that throughout our society, we have examples of people that have achieved international excellence, whether it is people in the oil and gas sector who, from my understanding, we have Trinbagonians working around the world, to things that might seem frivolous on the surface, but who was not proud, at the very least, when Wendy won Miss Universe. And she's not the only international pageant winner that won it. And our girls won it at a time when the prestige, one could argue, was much higher than it is now. And that's not all. From international athletes, gold medalists, artists, when Peter Minshall played his part in the Olympics. These are things to make us proud, and yet we don't necessarily as a society do much of anything to potentially promote the next gold medal winner, the next artist that's going to impact the opening and closing ceremony of the Olympics, the next Miss Universe or Miss World winner, the next personality that's going to once again make us proud, whether in the public limelight or even to some extent in the everyday business of whatever industry out there. We have a lot of good people. And unfortunately, I guess part of it is in too many ways, our good people have to go abroad, whether they live abroad, to work abroad, maybe airline pilots, maybe graduates with the brain drain. Of course, our athletes tend to have to train abroad. Our artists might have to seek a significant amount of their financial stability, not even necessarily success, but let's go with success, abroad. How long will these things be, in my opinion, considered the red-headed stepchildren of our society? Because the irony is, our academic education system, it's not like it's going at a near perfect or even great rate. I have a lot of questions with regards to how well that positions our young people for the future. And perhaps part of the problem is we are now forcing too many of our young men and women to be square pegs and round holes. This is the one path, and we don't really facilitate any other path. Now, before we get to the meat of the matter, a couple other things I wanted to highlight. One, Gary Griffith is doing something that all politicians should be doing, but I'm not really seeing them do it. Maybe it's just not visible enough. Maybe I missed it. He spoke out against the incident. I didn't see it for myself, but the old man who was wearing a P&M shirt, and he was essentially being accosted by someone who took a video of his very apparent disagreement, let's put it that way. And Gary Griffith spoke out against it. It wasn't against somebody potentially committing political violence against an NTA supporter. He spoke out against something that was being done to a PNM supporter. Now, one could say he's just playing politics and that it's not necessarily genuine, but the fact of the matter is, at the very least, he's doing it. Whether you think it's perfunctory or not, whether you think he's going through motions or not, whether you think he's doing it for optics or not, at least he is doing it. At least he understands politics and leadership at that level. If you don't think he's being genuine, that's fine. But I would at least like other politicians to figure it out at that level, where it seems as though they don't even know how to do the obvious leadership and communication functions. The other thing, just wanted to mention quickly, Central Bank has pointed out that, food inflation is, I believe it's over 3%. It rose from 2.4 to 3.1%. They also say that jobs, the unemployment rate was reduced from 5.1 to 4.8%. Now, a couple of us at Talking Point, we kind of looked at that unemployment rate and wondered how accurate was that. But I think the other thing is, with regards to the food inflation, I really don't want to hear the Minister of Finance say that inflation is 0.3% or whatever number. That does not tell the story of the economic situation of the country. Because at the end of the day, he might want to use some adjusted figures to say how much of what people are experiencing is what matters, regardless of the source. Even if all of our food inflation is coming from abroad, every single bit of it could come from abroad. The fact of the matter is it's still there. And it's not necessarily a great sign. This is, I guess, one of the unspoken implications of at least, I don't know if the minister's continuing this defense, and we'll have more on his commentary later, but with regards to inflation and food inflation, I don't know if he's continuing his defense, but the implication of, well, our inflation is low. Yeah, but you already admitted we import $7 billion worth of food. We import more food than we produce ourselves. We rely on food imports, and there's inflation on food abroad. So what's the plan to deal with that? The implication is our food production is so low and so minuscule. If our inflation is very low and food inflation is ultimately at 3.1%, and it's mainly due to foreign influences, is our local production so low it barely registers? And regardless, if it's not going to change the price of bread, if our low inflation rate from our own internal economic activity is literally not going to change the price of bread, what's even the point of boasting about it throughout the last year? I have no idea. And even if the inflation rate for food was low, which it would be very difficult for that to be, at the end of the day, like in the UK, food prices are already high. We've jumped that shark already. It's already at the borderline for too many households. We're grateful that we don't have food inflation because that might price families out of buying food. But enough with my general musings. Now we have to get a little bit deeper into some more technical issues. Let's start off today's daily review. As if to highlight previous communication from NACTA, they gave us the poll. The poll indicated both parties, the population might not have been necessarily feeling both parties, might not necessarily been happy with both parties. Potentially, according to what they surveyed, were not happy with the leaders of both parties. Now, I guess you could say they've added to the narrative, saying that it seems as though now a poll organization, a survey is not going to be the be-all and end-all of what the population actually thinks. And of course, a population will change its mind over time, potentially in the short term. So, but according to them, according to their information, population is not convinced with either the PNM or the UNC to deal with either crime or the economy. And I find that to be fascinating, but also depressing. One of the things that they've highlighted is, once again, and I've said this before, so maybe someone else saying it will make people accept it better. The UNC not being able to capitalize on the failures of the administration is somewhat stunning. It's somewhat incredible that you have a situation where the administration is in a weak position. The results are bad. One could argue the results are bad in many areas, but we could at least say crime, the results are bad, and to some extent, the cost of living is not in a position where people, the average man in the street is going to be happy. And yet, one of the things highlighted is the fact that the people are not convinced with the candidates that the UNC have put forward. That's not to say that they did not necessarily have windows of opportunity to get candidates that could have been appreciated by the population, that could have impressed the population. One of the things that NACTA is pointing out is, and this ship may have sailed because I don't expect the leadership of the UNC to be able to come back to this, but Gary Griffin, highest rating of any police commissioner, at least any police commissioner in recent memory, according to NACTA. According to NACTA, many voters believe in Gary Griffith. He is the best person to address crime. But not just him. Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, NACTA says if he was available, and unfortunately, and this is something that I guess is out of the hands of the UNC, he's not available because he's staying away from politics. They said someone like him, criminals may have taken seriously, the population may take seriously as someone who may be able, because of his reputation, to deal with crime. He's credible. And I would argue part of his credibility is also the fact that he has stepped away from politics. He has done high-profile cases. Of course, he has his reputation while in politics. But he doesn't have a lot of the recent baggage that some of his former peers that he's worked with, served with, have to deal with. One of the other interesting things, and I think this is what makes this election both interesting and painful, is the fact that between the PNM and UNC, there seems to be no one that the population is considering could really deal with the economy. There doesn't seem to be much plans, much policies, and again, the question, of course, now is, you could kind of understand why the PNM is in this situation. They're the incumbents. If they had someone to fix things, theoretically, it would already be fixed. The UNC is trying to now campaign itself, to lobby itself, to propose itself, to market itself as, we are the alternative. We are the alternative, because this is how we're going to fix it. And yet, with regards to the economy, doesn't seem to be much being offered there. Now, the public is concerned that UNC has not attracted a credible person in Parliament with the ability to turn around the declining economy. According to NACTA, that's quoted from NACTA. They go on to say that former Minister Vasan Barath has been identified by some voters. So we don't necessarily know how many or what percentage of the survey, how the percentage of the people polled, which then is, that's just a fraction of a fraction, but still, some voters has identified Vasan Barath as someone who has faith and confidence, who has the faith and confidence of the business community. Except they go on to say that he was not chosen by the party to contest any seat. And one could argue you would want your best candidates to be candidates for constituencies, to be MPs, to help you win seats. Usually I lament the fact that name brand recognition is really not that important. This election might be one where it is. Sometimes it is important, but not in the right way. But this election, it might be because the margins are so thin and you need to eke out any little advantage. If there are any close seats and either side leaves out people who are perceived as popular on the table, and if there are any close seats like what we saw in the THA election with some of the Southwest Tobago seats, well, then the question would be, would those people left on the sidelines have made a difference? So we've reached a point now where the election is up in the air and things are undecided. I've just been handed a media release, December 30th, pursuant to Section 8 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Her Excellent Christine Kangaloo, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief, has, on the advice of the Honorable Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of the Republic, declared a state of emergency, being satisfied that the circumstances of Section 8(2)(c) of the Constitution exist. The circumstances warrant the declaration of public emergency are based on the advice of Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the National Security Council of heightened criminal activity which endangers the public safety. That is today for immediate release. With that, we will take a break. When we come back, we'll delve into that because the Prime Minister, he did have a strong reaction, crossing 600 murders. Hopefully, we'll be able to get more on that for you. Breaking news today. Stay tuned on Talking Point. We'll be right back after this.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com. And we're here talking about the WSN, the Content Capital Show. Michael Smallhead just read out a press release, and I have also seen what seemed to be an official document declaring the state of emergency. We don't necessarily have details yet of what it entails, what might be restricted. Now, this, I guess, comes on the tail of crossing 600 meters, not just 600, but crossing 605 meters. I believe the meter rate is currently at 614. This is a record-breaking year at the end of the day. And we are basically seeing the highest 3 meter rates of the country within the last 3 years. We got a bit of a reprieve last year, but that, I would argue, was not necessarily a genuine reprieve. It wasn't a trend because it went down for a year. One data point is not a trend. One data point is statistically not that relevant at the end of the day. And it wasn't like it dipped by a significant number. Now it's back up there. The one silver lining is that we haven't necessarily blown past the 600 meter mark. It's not like we're close to 700. That silver lining is extremely minor. Now, with regards to the meter rate, and this could be why the Prime Minister decided to have a state of emergency, and it lines up well for how we planned the show. The Prime Minister came out and he had strong language with the crime situation, and he had a phrase that I never heard before, right? So one of the headlines is, the Prime Minister was speaking to the police, to the judiciary, as well as to the population. And one could argue that his words maybe was pointing fingers at everybody else. Now, here's the thing. I'll give him this. What he said was not without merit. Perhaps one could argue that what he said did not paint the whole picture of culpability with regards to the crime situation. But what he said to each of those 3 groups that I pointed out there, to the police, to the population, and to the judiciary, was not without merit. But perhaps the main issue would be that to some extent, it's disingenuous for him to point the fingers there and to not necessarily show us what the parliamentarians and the cabinet are going to be doing differently that they have not done before to hold up their end of the bargain, because part of it is leadership as well as addressing whatever legislative loopholes or failures or lackings there are, or potentially trying to update legislation just to deal with new situations, right? Usually people think, oh, bring back hangings, but listen, hangings, the death penalty is still in the books, and that is I believe, we only have murder. We don't have murder 2 in our laws. We have murder. We have manslaughter, but not murder 1, murder 2, to make that distinction, premeditated or spur of the moment. And the penalty for murder is the death penalty. There are other reasons why we are unable to utilize it. One could argue that even with utilizing the death penalty, it wouldn't really matter given the near suicidal mindsets of those involved in violent criminal activity, in gang culture at least. What will another threat of death do to them when they're facing the threat of death every day and still opting into that life? Who knows, right? That's a question for social scientists, and we'll probably never know the answer. But let's just go with what the Prime Minister said. First of all, he said he was disappointed with the 600 deaths, unacceptable high level of violent crime. Well, part of the problem is he could say things like, and this is the quote, as much as the police has done, they are required to do more if the stated objectives are to be attained. Well, what does that mean? He says the government will continue to provide full support to the police. What does that mean? Full support pushing past budgetary restrictions, or full support staying within the confines of budgetary restrictions? That's point number 1. Full support being that you will seek to pass more aggressive but reasonably thought out legislation. Full support that you will pass aggressive, not necessarily well thought out legislation. Full support in that you provide better policy decisions, better support services, more resources. Like full support, what does that mean? Because we haven't necessarily seen anything. This is the thing. Outside of telling the police to do more and giving them a minister in the Ministry of National Security just for them, we haven't necessarily seen the government do much of anything. Ironically, the Commissioner of Police had to put a stop, had to hit the pause button on the new recruits that was promised in not the last budget, but the budget before. Not the budget read this year, October, but the budget read last year, where we were supposed to get 1,000 new recruits, and they started the recruitment drive in January. There were long lines and large crowds, and I even ran into one young man who was on his way, in his shirt and tie, looked like a good, respectable young man. I had a lot of hope, except the commissioner to come out, and this might be the one good thing she's done, and I'll give her props for this, because I think it to some extent, this took a little bit of bravery here, because you're going against, I guess you could say, government policy, but maybe she knew, listen, we need to not fool ourselves. Where she said, these people aren't ready to be put out on the streets. They can't be sworn in. We need to pick pause here. We ain't gonna throw lambs to the slaughter, which might be the case. Now, I don't think it was expanded onto why they weren't ready. This is the one good thing that I have taken note of that the commissioner has done. Besides that, there hasn't necessarily been many good things coming from the commissioner. More on one of the latest things in a bit. But I guess part of the issue with the government saying the police need to be doing more, it's more, you set up the executive leadership of the police. You did, the government. You set up the commissioner to be where she is. A commissioner who, outside of that one example, which was this year, has not done anything that I could think of that positively impacted the police service in any way. And then there's the rest of the executive, which has a lot of questions over their heads, right? DCP Martin, there's a lot of questions there that stakeholders either have or should have, among others. And could we please try to get at least one member of the executive that could handle a press conference in any sort of significant manner? It's not just the ability to speak, because there are ministers who can speak very well and are charismatic. That don't mean that they perform well at press conferences. Of course, the Prime Minister called out the population. We need to stop, to those who are saying nothing, stop normalizing criminal conduct in your social life. That would be easy, except some of the people who are not saying anything are in communities that are crime hotspots. They don't want to get hurt. So it's a catch-22. I agree with the Prime Minister that people need to speak out more, be witnesses, report crimes and stuff. I am not going to sit down here and say, oh, but yeah, it's just easy, just do it. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like cyclical logic. You can't do it in a vacuum. You can't treat it as though it's in isolation. The crime levels make people feel unsafe, and to some extent they are unsafe reporting crime. Part of that is because you don't always have faith in every single police officer. But I won't say more than that. And then with regards to the judiciary, he goes on to say, those who are responsible for dispensing justice stop pretending that criminals are the victims who deserve only mercy, when by their heartless, lawless behavior, they are to receive firm punishment as prescribed by the law, as enacted in anticipation to cover the various destabilizing practices. That's nice. Here's the problem. Most of the time, the judges are acting within the law. If you want the law as you intended but fail to write properly to get the results you wanted, well then that's not a judiciary problem, that's a you problem. You're the legislature. The judiciary acts within the confines of the law. And I understand the sentiment. I myself want to see the book thrown at criminals. But if our laws and our procedures and our regulations and our practices are not well thought out and potentially infringe on the rights of individuals, regardless of what I would like to see with the crime situation, the day we do anything to significantly undermine the individual freedoms of anybody in society, no matter how good of a cause, we are basically asking ourselves to really damage our democracy. That's one of the complexities of trying to deal with crime. One of. It's a big one, because it's a one where if you start down that slope, it's very hard to get off of it. And let's not assume that you, whoever you consider yourself to be, would be in charge. Because whoever's in charge in the right moment, all of a sudden, that's how dictatorships are born. I won't say any more about that. Now, with that said, there are issues with the judiciary. I don't necessarily know if what the Prime Minister said are the issues that, if it's being pointed out the right way. But there are issues with the criminal justice system. But part of that, like the police, comes back down to, well, what has the government done to try to fix it? Now, the situation is so large, I don't know if it can be fixed. With regards to just the sheer amount of crime, it may be to the point where it is nearly impossible in any practical means or in any practical measure to increase the capacity of the criminal justice system to meet just the sheer number of cases. If the police actually was able to have a 90% detection rate, some of those murder trials might take, I don't even know. If you have a traffic ticket, your day in court is over a year away. Murder trials take long already with a less than 20% detection rate. Imagine if we had a 90%. If we had all those cases, or there might be some redundancy. Some people might be repeat offenders. But still, what has been done to address that? To stabilize a forensic situation or gun testing situation, some things the capacity might not necessarily increase to the point where it will be sufficient, but it could increase to try to help deal with the backlog. So I understand where the Prime Minister is coming from. He's technically, at least in very general senses, not wrong. But at the end of the day, you like to say that you're the ones in charge when things goes right, so credit to you. Well, when things goes wrong, blame needs to go to you too. It needs to be consistent. If you're not taking the credit, then you could maybe get away from the blame. But if you want to take the credit, at the end of the day, this is, for better or worse, what our government is doing for us. Government, technically, especially on crime, also includes the opposition. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that. Because any meaningful legislation to deal with crime would require opposition support. And in a couple of cases, we got it, but then now, at the end of the day, we still don't see gangsters being arrested despite the fact that it's illegal to be in a gang. We still have a poor murder detection rate. We still probably have guns and drugs going through this country with maybe a drop in the bucket being interdicted. We still have a poor accountability within certain areas of the police service, the Coast Guard. We don't know what the regiment is and the Air Guard, what they're supposed to be doing. And to what extent now, as one lawyer pointed out, $66 billion spent on national security, and yet this is what we have. So, if we opt to believe the Prime Minister, more resources, the police have the full support. Well, apparently the full support is not enough. And we need, maybe it's not just about money, but it's also about leadership. It's about innovation. It's about ideas, new strategies. Or maybe it's about just doing the basic things correct, like recruitment and training, like culture building in an organization. And unfortunately, we may have reached the stage right now. I'm sure if any of you have been a fan of a sports team or a band, you know that at some point the relationships within the organization breaks down, and it is too hard to rebuild without essentially starting over. Except we're not talking about a single sports team or a single government entity. We're talking about the national security apparatus here. But again, let me remind you, it's not just about getting rid of the PNM. Because to what extent, like the NACTA poll suggests, and I have said at times, is the opposition partially to blame? Because for that level of legislation, you need a special majority, not a simple majority. So now we have a state of emergency still. We will wait to see what the details are. According to other news sources, at least one other, yes, there is. And right now, the media release is making its rounds, as well as the official proclamation by the president with her seal. Maybe we could get that picture for you, but by all means, it seems as though this state of emergency is very real. We just don't know what it means. And the timing is interesting because they are willing to do it on the eve of New Year's Eve. There will be a lot of parties, a lot of people wanting to go out tomorrow night. One could argue why they're doing it now for, blah, 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 blah. Except if they don't do it now, what are you waiting for? Are people's right to party more important than public safety? Again, this is without any context of what exactly the details of the state of emergency is. Will there be a curfew? That'll be a hell of a thing to declare today that there will be a curfew from tomorrow. And if they declare the curfew starting from January 1st, that will also be a hell of a thing to say. The timing is interesting here. I think they set themselves up to have an unpopular declaration one way or the other. I don't envy the position that to some extent they put themselves in, but it is what it is. We'll see what they have to say. I just want to go because of time, we might not necessarily have a lot of time to get into current events tomorrow being scheduled the last show of the year, obviously December 31st. So I'll try and get through the last three topics quickly before we welcome our guests. First off, I guess you could argue this is quite disappointing to some extent. Of course, the PNM, they have their own internal situation where, based on limited information, it is perceived that the government, well, certain factions of the government maybe wanted Stuart Young and others did not. And the process by which that was going to happen were questioned, being undemocratic. Of course, there's the whole internal election situation that was also questioned, I believe, last year. Then, of course, UNC had its own 5 dissidents. And those who want to see significant changes or upgrades within the party didn't necessarily call out the political leader, which is interesting that they did not. But I think their sentiments, while not necessarily the same, have been echoed by the NACTA poll as well as political analysts with regards to the UNC needing to upgrade itself. And that has caused an internal rift, where to some extent, maybe some of the better MPs are the dissidents. And then, of course, I suspect there are cases of a couple of senators basically being sidelined because they're not part of the leadership's plans for the core of the party to be formed. They're just kind of kept on the outside looking in. Same thing with the PNM potentially. Now, those two parties having internal issues. I mean, all organizations will have internal issues. It's if it will be revealed to the public. And unfortunately now, I guess, what little hope to see a change in the equation. I didn't necessarily want to see any third party win the election. That's a little bit too idealistic. That's a bridge too far. We ain't gonna get there. That's a big leap. If it happens, that will be incredibly fascinating to study how that occurred. But it would be more realistic to say, maybe win a seat, maybe restart or start your political journey. In the case of the COP, it will be restarting. They made some gains and then they backed the wrong horse. They stuck to the wrong strategy. And ironically, the person responsible for that, potentially, or at least perceived to be, is to some extent at the center of what's going on, where they have an internal situation where membership is calling out Prakash Ramada's means of gaining political leadership of the COP as the interim leader. And essentially what they're saying is, hey, you didn't follow the party's constitution. But he hit back saying, hey, the party has not followed its constitution for the last 4 years. So how is it practical? All of a sudden, we haven't done things properly. And I haven't been here to be part of that. We haven't done things properly for the last 4 years. So to say now, all of a sudden, for the appointment of the next political leader, all of a sudden, we could do things properly when some of the, I guess you could say, the executive leadership is in that gray area, that's no man's land, that would be impractical. I think, however, he is kind of overplaying his hand. What he really should be doing is he should be saying, from now, we need to start going back to the Constitution. Yes, the election is right around the corner. We need to toot sweet figure out a way to get everything above board, to right the ship. But I think his argument is, no. We did it this way where the outgoing political leader, and I guess, shame on me for missing this, the outgoing political leader who resigned, how does he have the authority to appoint the next political leader? That is literally one of the situation that, or one of the situations in the PNM. Why does the outgoing guy have the right to pick his successor? Because he loses the authority once he leaves, and the successor could only take that position once he leaves. So I'm kind of disappointed with the COP, and now it's making me think, alliances, if they can't figure this out, because they're playing it out in the public. And I do wonder who is acting with genuine concern for the public and who is being disingenuous and is holding on to their little bit of power. Because, and perhaps now we're all seeing, just like how certain people went back to the mothership, whether it's the PNM or the UNC, despite their previous complaints of the current leadership, because they see the winds of change are coming. Perhaps the third parties are saying that too, the opportunity to get back into the game. Now you want to be in the driver's seat. But then is that for the benefit of you or for the benefit of all? Then next story, just want to hit quick. I'm wondering if the Minister of Finance really understands finance. The problem is, it seems as though he's this is my impression, so I may be wrong. Feel free to correct me later on in the call-in segment. Seems as though he kind of wants to imply that part of the Forex issue is the fact that credit card usage is driving up foreign exchange transactions, large ones. And to some extent, I'm even trying to figure out what his argument is, right? Newsday, in their article, essentially reiterated that they reported back in November 15th that IMBIT saying a 50% hike in use of credit cards could be partially blamed for Trinidad and Tobago's current Forex crunch. And if that is, because I can't remember personally, and I wasn't able to check back, if that is what the Minister of Finance is claiming, well, blame credit card usage to some extent. No, credit cards are means to an end. The cash is not as available. So businesses are looking to use credit cards more, not because of credit cards, but because they just have needs and there's less cash in circulation, which is why the banks are now, because they have less available cash, they had to drop the spending limit on the US side of credit cards because they weren't able to guarantee that they could meet the purchases and didn't want to face the penalties of not. It's not about credit cards. Stop trying to say as though there were some unique aspects of credit cards that's relevant to the situation. It's mostly irrelevant. Credit card is just the alternative to getting cash, or not necessarily physical cash, but electronic currency to get your TNT dollars changed in advance to US currency to then do your transactions. They can't get it, so they use a credit card. It was a loophole. The demand is the same regardless. So there's a part of me that's wondering, because sometimes people say, oh, the government is lying, the government trying to mama guy. I'm wondering if the Minister of Finance really doesn't fully understand what's going on. At least based on, again, if I'm reading his statements wrong, you could tell me later on in the show. But the way how it's reading, it's like, why are you even bringing this up in the manner that you are? When the core issue is the unavailability of foreign exchange, not the increase in credit card usage. The increase in credit card usage is a symptom, not a cause. It's not even necessarily a symptom. It's an attempted solution to the main symptoms. Last thing I want to touch on, hopefully I'll be quick. I haven't been quick, even though I said I'm trying to be. This whole gel blaster situation, I was kind of besides myself when I saw the report on social media. I saw a video from a news outlet. And like what I said about the Prime Minister earlier, what the commissioner is saying with regards to warning people, hey, be careful, guns that look too real, even though they're toy guns, but they look too much like real guns, be careful. The misuse of these things, we'll crack down on it. But here's the thing. First of all, Customs has to accept these guns. They've confiscated some of these gel blasters. I know that, right? That don't necessarily look like real guns. That's point number one. But, all right, fine. Customs needs to do their job if this was an issue. But here's the thing. And there may be some that look too real. All right, fine. But this was already a thing. No one thought, oh, I could use a toy gun that looks like a real gun in a crime and I'll get away with it because it's not a real gun. I don't think anybody thought of this. That's number one. Number two, the gel blasters, I've actually, because it's what the kids, that's what's popular with the kids. That's what's trendy with the kids. So I've actually used one. Yes, if you shoot someone in the eye with it, that could be bad. Outside of that, it's relatively safe. Relatively, right? And they are mostly relatively colorful. So I get it. I just don't necessarily know the messaging, the optics. What the commissioner is saying is not wrong, but it's almost as though, well, we can't deal with the real guns, so let's worry about people using toy guns. Because here's the thing, I'm pretty sure it's not that hard for criminals to get real guns. And I'm pretty sure criminals are not going to want to take toy guns to a gunfight. So there's a part of me that wonders, what is the point of this, per se, given the climate? If crime was under control and, whatever. But given the fact that we have an illegal gun problem and a murder problem, I'm not worried about someone using a fake gun to rob someone. I'm not worried about someone using a gel blaster in public and being a nuisance. There are already laws for that. If they are that stupid, well then, kudos to the police that arrest that individual and whatever charges apply. But that's... It'll be very hard to actually murder someone with a gel blaster. So I think our priorities and our focus should be more on the task at hand. Because as we cross 640 meters, I don't want to see the commissioner's focus being toy guns. It doesn't play well optically. Yeah, I mean, yes, you have to monitor it and whatever, I get that. But, all right, let's take a break and we will welcome the media ambassador. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best birthday gifts are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola.
Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
And we're back here on talking about the WSND content capital, and of course, breaking news. I think it's making the rounds in social media. We have the proclamation, not just the media release here, of the president essentially declaring the state of emergency. But I don't believe, my quick perusal, we don't necessarily have the details on the state of emergency. We don't necessarily have, you know, the length of time, what the restrictions would be, what the special powers granted to the national security services would be. So as far as we're aware, this is very real, but we have to wait. Now, joining me is our media ambassador from the TTPS, who informed me, and let's not necessarily hold them to a complete 100% account if it doesn't work out this way, because, you know, the government might decide to delay, but ASP Arun is with me, and ASP Arun, is it to your understanding that there will be a briefing this morning for the state of emergency?
Yeah, I was told that there would be a briefing this morning. My sources haven't confirmed that though. So we're waiting on it.
And just so people are aware, the police don't declare a state of emergency. So,
no.
And you're not the commissioner, so no. You're not going to know the details of what it entails.
I don't, but yeah, that's true. The state of emergency gives powers to the army as opposed to the police alone. So the army will not be in charge at in a state of emergency.
Actually, somebody asked me, the person that brought me the news first, if this would allow the army to kind of patrol more independently.
Yes,
so they have more powers.
As I said, they should be in charge, and they could execute exercises and whatnot with the assistance of the police, of course. It's mostly a joint exercise, so you would expect more movement by the army on the ground, and exercises and patrols and whatnot.
Is it that it makes it easier to deploy more soldiers, or is it to give them more powers to make the deployment?
It gives them more powers. In a sense, they are given the powers of police officers to operate on the ground.
Now, one of the things is people have been calling for state of emergency, I think, off and on for the last couple of years.
Yeah, they have, yeah.
Now, the thing is, from your perspective, this is potentially an opportunity to utilize the greater powers, and maybe some of the restrictions would limit crime while the greater powers will allow you to fight crime.
Yeah.
But you had an interesting point where, one of the concerns would be maybe overzealous arrests might lead to lawsuits.
Yeah, of course.
You brought up something interesting that sometimes, I guess, depending on the danger potentially of the situation, it might just be better for the police or the state to act and then, deal with the consequences. Once no one is killed out of hand or anything like that. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And so you want the police and the army and the security services to operate freely. What it does, it also it gives weight for the absence of warrants and your civil rights and to some extent and whatnot.
And this would all depend on what they declare the state of emergency to be and the powers.
Yeah. There could be a time frame, there could be a curfew, there could be it could be a particular area like hotspots. So the government or the minister might use the opportunity to utilize the state of emergency in a hotspot or in Trinidad and Tobago in totality. Yeah.
Now, I would have imagined before this announcement, one of the things that you would have wanted to speak about today, given that it's December the 30th, is to caution people with regards to it. December 31st, it's one of the biggest party nights of the year. Of course, that means drinking and being out late and then driving.
Right. So we want persons to be cautious, be aware of your surroundings as usual. But in this party mode that we go into on New Year's Eve, we want persons to also be careful when drinking and driving. We don't want persons on the roadway. I simply have always put it, if you have a drink, stay off the government road. Stay away from your vehicle. Better take a rest, better sober up, and then you proceed with your vehicle elsewhere.
Now, the state of emergency brings up a very interesting question with regards to, we don't know what's going on. So hopefully we will know as soon as possible, because I'm sure there are not just a lot of people who want to know what their New Year's Eve plans are going to be, but businesses will like to know, like, are we going to even be able to, how do we mitigate our losses if we can't? But let's just say that the state of emergency is a curfew that curtails all events. People might still want to try to do something because it's December 31st, right?
Yeah, and we would have to caution against that, because even in a state of emergency, again, you may not be able to move about freely. So you might have a curfew, as I said, might be in a hotspot area. They will be able to target particular areas of crime that they want to keep under control. And you might be in an area partying and you may not be able to leave the next day or maybe the same night. So you'll want to be very cautious of where you go, especially during a state of emergency, that your rights may be suspended for some time. You won't be able to move about freely if that's the case that the government puts in place.
And, well, I don't know. I guess, of course, our callers will call in. We crossed the murder rate record. It is what it is. I don't think anyone should be surprised by that. Yeah. There was recent concerns about the police service. To what extent, from your perspective, the commissioner cautioned against realistic-looking toy guns and gel blasters. Yeah. To what extent is that a significant concern on the ground? Because I can imagine for some police officers, you don't want to have a situation where a young man has something that looks real,
Yeah.
And it's potentially, you know, you don't know who he's pointing, what's he doing with it, and it
Right.
could lead to an unfortunate incident.
Yeah, because I mean, even a toy gun could appear to be a lethal weapon, and the officers would use they would utilize the use of force policy, and if they believe that their lives are in danger, just by the mere pointing of a gun at them, because you're not going to wait till somebody shoot you, you're going to use force as necessary in keeping with the use of force policy, and the officers may engage that person and try to eliminate the threat. And hopefully the person doesn't lose their lives, but it could happen. We're looking at a situation that could happen, and that's hence the reason the commissioner is advising that these objects or these toys be responsibly used. Maybe you could use it in a closed setting. Maybe you could use it indoors as opposed to outdoors on the government road. Again, once the officers engage you, and they, especially in the night, you wouldn't want you wouldn't want to pretend you're pointing a toy gun at an officer in the night, and he utilizes the use of force policy, thinking his life is in danger, and he protects himself, and he tries to eliminate the threat.
Now, most of them do look like toys. I've seen many.
Yeah,
some of them up close.
I've seen some look like toys, but I've also seen real weapons look like toys.
Right. What I was getting to is, I do think some might look very real, or in some cases they look like toys, but they're shaped.
I've seen one that looks like a what we call a desert camo color.
And
I've seen illegal firearms that have that pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they still have to be careful.
But I've also, because people might underestimate that real guns are not that huge, right? Certain carbines and rifles are not that big. They might appear to be the similar sizes to toys. Yeah. And the toy itself, I have seen them, they look like toys color-wise, but the shape of it resembles real firearms.
We have, there are FUL holders and even illegal firearm holders that have what we call specific, what they call adaptations of the firearm. So you could actually take a pistol that's a very short barrel weapon, and it look like a long barrel weapon.
Right.
So
yes.
There's objects devices they could use to make the weapon look bigger. Well, so the same toy you're looking at could be an illegal firearm or even a legal firearm based on the circumstances.
But what I was getting at is I could see where some people might have the very smart, and by smart I mean foolish, they're smart men. Where you take a toy that is some fluorescent color scheme, all kind of crazy looking, so it looks like a toy, and they modify it to look real.
And there are, but there are lethal barrel weapons like firearms that actually look like toys.
Right, but
I have seen a pink Glock.
Now, the reason why I bring it up is, what would that mean for the law? Because to some extent, I would not fault the police for saying, hey, you took this toy gun and you made it look like a real gun. Right. We want to confiscate that because we can't allow this to be on the streets.
No, you can't be charged for possession of an imitation weapon, but the charge is accompanied by an offense. So you have to use it in a commission of offense, like a robbery or an assault, a common assault. So if you use it to threaten somebody, whatever reason you use your weapon for, and it's not a real firearm, you can be charged for possession of an imitation firearm. So even if it's a gel blast and it looks like a firearm, and you use it to commit an offense, you can be charged for possession of an imitation firearm. As I said, I've seen pink Glocks. So
yes, going back to one of our previous conversations, I actually saw a video of a father and his daughter, and the daughter who had the M4 or the AR-15, and it was a pink AR-15.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, those things are not that big. This was a girl maybe 12 or under. It wasn't like the gun was oversized for her. It looked like the size of a Nerf toy gun, which they have toys that look in toy stores here.
Yeah.
If you paint them black,
yeah,
especially at night, they could be confused with real firearms.
Yeah, something that we usually see. I mean, but if it's a mere toy, we don't normally arrest the person for it unless they use it in the commission of offense.
Right. So, if you do so, I guess you could say you're kind of taking your safety into your own hands.
Yeah, the officer may seize the weapon and question you about it, depending on what it was, in what context they held you.
But not just, don't you also run the risk of a civilian or a criminal responding negatively to such? You have a gun that looks real, but it's fake, but they decide, you're threatening me and I shoot you.
One of the clips I saw, and I think this is why the commissioner has taken the stance to warn persons about using them irresponsibly, because I've seen a clip where they pulled up near some guys and they started to shout gunman or gunmen. And people started to scamper. Now, I don't know if they knew that they were playing a game together and they scampered for the risk of getting shot, but nonetheless, you could understand if you pounce on the criminal element who have legitimate, real firearms, not legitimate, but real firearms.
Yeah.
They were to return fire. So then we also have to be responsible in how we utilize these toys and our children using these toys.
Yeah, I think there's a report about one community utilizing these toys as a community to have large-scale play fights. The one thing that I think is a bridge too far at the very least is when they said they also do drive-bys with gel blasters. I'm like, maybe don't do that, because if a police officer sees that happens and responds, that might be bad.
Yeah, and hopefully it wouldn't be a negative response, and hopefully it wouldn't end negatively.
Yeah, because it's not like you could see the difference between bullets or gels in real time.
Yeah, I think the officer does have seconds to respond, as opposed to time afterwards to deliberate on it. So in a quick response, in keeping with the use of force policy, yes, hold on. Sorry, somebody else walked in. Sorry. So we've seen that, and we have to be careful because, as I said, the officers only have seconds to respond, and if their lives are in danger and they usually keep the use of force policy, it may end badly for some people. And so it's a toy. Keep it in the context of a toy. Play with it inside, unless legislation is made to deal with the issue. I think persons should be more responsible with how they use them. And hopefully officers could make out the weapon, the toy, before they respond negatively.
I'll say this, before anybody says the police are being cowards, why they can't wait, what are they afraid of? What if it was pointed at a civilian?
Yeah. And
then now the police officer has to determine, is that a real gun or a toy gun?
Yeah.
And if they hesitate, a civilian could be killed.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, we won't take a break. We'll go straight to opening up the phone lines. So our viewers could call in. I don't know, ASP, if you have anything else to add, but we'll just open the phone lines now. You could call in. I mean, you could ask about the state of emergency. You could ask the ASP questions about it, but just know that it's not like he's part of the National Security Council. He's not the Prime Minister.
Very limited information.
Right. So he's just like the rest of us. To some extent, he's waiting. The police service, to some extent, is waiting for the details from the National Security Council, from the cabinet, or whoever will be the...
Well, we take our instructions from the commissioner, so I'm waiting on the commissioner's instructions.
Right. So you will have to wait kind of twofold. She will have to see what's going on and then decide how the police service is going to respond. We have Digger Martin on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Good morning, Sean and the honorable officer there. A prosperous and a bright new year to all for 2025. Two issues I want to talk on, and one of them is the state of emergency calling of it, but the first one I want to talk and congratulate the pan man, Mr. Joshua Gregrello. It was a great achievement. Yes, we have to give him all the big up and things like that, but I'm going to juxtapose that with another incident where 4 people in the pipeline was alive for 36 hours. But that they're alive and somebody decided to go from rescue to recovery. Those 4 divers were doing something noble to the country. They were looking at areas to create revenue for Trinidad and Tobago. We still have not understood why they went down there. We still have not seen or heard who basically gave the instructions on when, who took the authority to terminate those people's lives. That is a serious thing, and we are putting it by the sideline. You cause a commission of inquiry to identify what is the cause of it. Corporate manslaughter was big. You, as the state, have not aggressively pursued the prosecution of the state or the state organization that was responsible for the corporate manslaughter, and you haven't looked at even giving some assistance to these 4 people. And I'm hoping that the same amount of assistance we're possibly going to give to Joshua for his wonderful achievement, we have to translate that to these people. The other thing, this state of emergency reminds me, and I'm going to be very, very direct at the police service, tells me that the police service has again collapsed. For the coup, they abandoned everything and the army took over. What has happened recently? We had a shooting in front of Abesso Street police station. What that tells you, were those police taking a nap? Where was the surveillance? What was the camera? Why they allow it to happen? The fact that that has happened tells me, and that is not the only police station that has been riddled with bullets. For example, the same incident happened in St. Joseph a year ago. In front of a police station, a guy went in to sign his thing, and they look him up. I mean, they say local parlance. You had other incidences where the police has not responded, and I am imagine that the national security has taken advice from a police service that has collapsed since days of policing. People have to remember that the executive of the police service currently, a lot of those officers were very silent as to who the perpetrator were in planning the day of policing. Now you have a senior DCP now. The whole police service appears to be, don't know what they're doing. That accident on the proprietary bus route, that is one, and there are several areas tell me that the police has lost control of what is going on, and they're fended from themselves. The fact that you advise the government to call a state of emission tells me you can't handle it, and you need support. And the only support I think should happen now is the whole executive should go, and we should start from scratch. It might be difficult for this current government to manage, but that is what I'm thinking. Go and have a nice morning.
Yeah, well, Sean, in the case of the shooting in the vicinity of Bessel Street, a spark perpetrator was held.
Okay.
Yeah, and a firearm was seized. In terms of the advice, I'm not too certain where who would have given advice and initiated the state of emergency. So I can't say that.
The media release, I didn't check the proclamation, but the media release says according to advice of the police to the National Security Council.
Okay.
But I guess to some extent, yeah, we don't necessarily know what the advice is.
Yeah, but even if the police did advise, I'm just saying based on the limited information I have, even if the police service advised the Prime Minister or the President to call a state of emergency, the thing is that it is a useful tool in terms of fighting crime. So it's not to say it's an absolute loss on the behalf of the police service that they were unable or they incompetent in fighting crime. It's just that it's a tool used, and I think that it was somewhat successful when Mr. Griffith was the commissioner, and he utilized the state of emergency, and he was able to keep the murder rate under law, under the what they call it, the murder rate, the high murder rate. Yeah, and it gives the police, it does give the police service some wiggle room in terms of effectively fighting crime. It's a very useful tool. I wouldn't say that the TTPS has collapsed. I'm saying that they have reached a stage where they think if indeed that the commissioner or the police service advise the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister or the President in such a direction, it does give us some wiggle room to really work with what we have. And it gives us the powers, as well as the army and the other arms of national security, to properly execute some of the duties that we sometimes debarred or curtailed from dealing with.
That's one thing I wanted to also mention, the fact that to some extent, politically speaking, right? Because politics isn't everything. So politically speaking, the police hopefully are aware that by calling or recommending a state of emergency, it will not reflect well on the police, on the surface at the least, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like a popular thing that you would think any politically motivated police leadership would want to do. And the other thing is this, it's not necessarily the case that the police collapse, so we need the SOE. One of the things that I mentioned, earlier on the show before you joined, was there are potential legislative deficiencies with regards to crime fighting. Yeah. And one of the ways to kind of shortcut the deficiencies in the short term, it's not a long-term solution by no means, but if you need to curtail violence now, you could do so with a state of emergency. Again, you still need to fix things properly in the long run, but in the short run, we just crossed 614. We had one situation where I don't follow all the murders, but my curiosity got the better of me, and the wife of a businessman and her son were attacked coming outside of a hospital, and she was more or less dead on the scene. Now, we don't know what she may or may not have been involved in or what the greater implications of the story are. That's besides the point. Right in front of a hospital, and we've seen situations where people going to hospital or in a hospital got attacked. These kinds of things, we could talk about all the social programs, all of the laws. We need to deal with the immediate term to kind of stop it, and this might be the way.
Yeah, that's the wiggle room I'm speaking about that the police would need to effectively carry out their duties. Hopefully it'll be a more efficient and effective manner than what we have right now. I mean, as you said, no police service wants to appear that they've become incompetent or has lost ideas on how to fight crime. I mean, we've tried everything. You have seen us on the ground. You have seen that we've solved some murders. You have seen the criminals out there targeting innocent people, as you said. They're basically overrunning the system, and now we need to deploy strategies that could properly well deal with it. And this is one of them. Unfortunately, this is one of them.
And I'll say this as well. As much as, yes, the police are the frontline service, and I have criticized the police. I've criticized police leadership, particularly.
Yeah.
Although I always say, understand that there are officers out there who are doing their best, and that's what's keeping everything going. If we want to go the premise the police service collapse, I think it's safe to say, well, a lot of other parts of the national security apparatus have also collapsed.
Yeah.
It's not in a vacuum. And a lot of the problems, the police could only deal with the drugs when it reaches the shore. Just to one thing. And the police can't actually do forensic testing and autopsies.
No.
And,
Yeah, we depend on a lot of stakeholders to assist us in the fight against crime. And again, hopefully this option would be utilized effectively, and we'll be able to have a better control on crime. So it's a wait-and-see situation for me. I would like to.
So potentially as early as 10 o'clock, I think. I'm not too sure if it's actually going to happen, even if that's what they intend. Press conferences, particularly like this, because this seems to be a very now-for-now situation. I will forgive them if they are half an hour late, an hour late, a couple hours late, although that might inconvenience a lot of the country. With regards to the situation with Paria, two things. One, I think we generally know how the accident did happen. The accident. It was an accident for those meant to get in that line in the first place. It was because of a pressure situation. Now, who's culpable for the accident? That's the first question. But, and I think this is what a lot of people on the inside who wanted to put a lot of the blame on the diver's employer and not Paria, was that you asked the question, the right question, but maybe not necessarily the right way. Because you said, who decided to take their lives? Something to that effect. That's not necessarily the best way to phrase it, but that's the right question. To put it another way, who decided to let them die?
Yeah.
That's the correct question there, right? Because that's what it seems like, given what we got from the Commission of Inquiry.
Yeah.
So the lack of accountability on this situation, I think if, people looking at it, and ASP, I do wonder if to some extent a lack of accountability on this, people might not understand it. But if we can't hold stakeholders and state entities and and whatnot, and even the NLCS, the employer, and whoever, if we can't hold people accountable for something like this, why do we expect smaller situations to the law to work out properly? You know, smaller situations of violence. One could argue a lot of the killings are not to the level of this, where 4 men die in such a circumstance. The population is seeing, oh, well, the government is just going through the motions here, potentially. Why are we going to have faith that the law is going to apply to murders? And a lot of the reason why we have such high crime is because the criminals, they have an expectations of not being caught, for better or worse.
They operate without hesitation and freely, and as they call, I said before, in the vicinity of the Best Street police station, there have been shootings in these of other police stations. And how long are we going to sit there and, you know, not try anything else? So I think, you know.
And of course, it goes back to, I don't know if you're aware, but the population is not necessarily, they don't have a lot of faith in the government on either side of the aisle of dealing with crime in particular. But they have people who they would like to see deal with it, who are politically inconvenient. And I won't say anymore. We have to move on the line. Good morning, caller, you on here.
Good morning, Sean, and to the officer there.
Morning.
Sean, you said something that really struck me a while earlier. You spoke about Ramesh Lawrence Mirage and the confidence that some people have in him dealing with crime. You know, one of the things I admire with Ramesh Lawrence Mirage, what he did, putting in place that Freedom of Information Act, and I've mentioned this before, and I've told that to colleagues and friends of mine. Ramesh Lawrence Mirage that idea he got to put in place the Freedom of Information Act showed without doubt that he understood his position as Attorney General. We have had too many Attorney Generals in this country who seem to not understand their position. An Attorney General is also the guardian of the public's interest. We have an Attorney General right now that he is nothing but a lackey of the government. And it seems to me as if the average citizen don't even understand that, to call these people out. And you know what I'm also coming to, Sean? This situation, now we have a state of emergency. We haven't got these particulars yet. But whatever is happening from this, I hope that this government understands their responsibility. I have a problem with the police service, yes, but I have a bigger problem with the government. This country, we have had a situation from ever since where we do not enforce laws. You cannot run a country like a parlor. You can't have PH on the road. You can't ignore noise pollution. You can't ignore littering, loitering, and these things, and then tell me you're running a country and you have the Prime Minister every now and again when it suits him. This is a country of laws. Which laws? Which laws? We started off on a bad footing since in the 60s. You cannot run a country this way. And no one seems to know this. Not our intellectuals. No one seems to be aware of this. I'm talking and we're going around in circles, and this nonsense has to stop. And I hope this state of emergency, whatever comes in place, but at the end of it, I don't want to have a noise pollution problem in my country again. I want laws to be enforced. Obama.
Thank you, caller. Actually, you bring up a good point that I forgot, because the person that showed me the media release, ASP, he asked, what does this mean about fireworks on New Year's? Because, of course, you know, people want to buy fireworks.
I don't think they will be able to utilize fireworks in a state of emergency. I don't think you're allowed to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, just in general, but then also with the restrictions, potentially.
If they have a curfew in place, then you can't be outside utilizing fireworks. So that in itself may incur an offense. So we have to actually see what is the details of the state of emergency, and we have to wait on the not the proclamation, because I think it was proclaimed, but the details of what it entails.
So one silver lining of the state of emergency, all of the activists who wanted to decry the noise pollution from fireworks might get an indirect win. Meanwhile, I will say this, caller from over, it's not that nobody has say in this, because I do believe two of our callers have brought this up most famously, well, Mr. Cascade / Belmont / Woodbrook / Blanchisseuse / Port of Spain, I believe he brings it up. But more importantly, the one that brings it up the most is the professor from Chaguanas about not enforcing laws.
Yeah. Well,
it's just,
I mean, we are being chastised for the violent crimes. We are being chastised for the murder rate, how high it is.
Yeah.
And effort we are utilizing to bring these rates down. So you would see some shortcomings in terms of every offense being policed. So you wouldn't have persons being arrested generally for washing a vehicle on a roadway.
But ASP, I do think though this is less about the police and more about the society and what the politicians don't want the police to deal with.
Well, I'm not sure of the political spin to it, but you must have the sorry about that. Yeah.
Fine.
So you must have the enforcement of laws. The caller is correct. As much as possible, officers must engage the laws that are in place and to proper police them. So he is correct. We need to enforce it as much as possible. But sometimes lesser laws or lesser offenses take a backseat to greater laws such as the murder rate and the violent crime rate and whatnot.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to society and what we have almost kind of institutionalized. You know, at the end of the day, the government is acknowledging PH taxis. How is that technically correct? So things like that. And that situation is risky both for the passengers and for the driver. And yet it's still, and it leads to violence, right?
And we've not seen we have not seen progress in terms of that issue. There hasn't been common ground. There hasn't been any initiatives to help bring about persons working PH into the realm of working legitimate taxi or taxis.
Well, I would argue, because I mentioned this, I think last week, some of these drivers don't even own the car. So it's not like they are making the money off of all of the profit off of the work they're doing. They're just earning a salary. Right. And one of the arguments against a wider government public transportation system is putting maxi and taxi drivers out of business. But then if there's a government national transportation service, there'll be jobs in that service. Not everybody owns the maxi they work on or the taxi. So and it would be a lot easier to regulate something like that if we have a bus service.
Ownership has nothing to do with the barring someone from gaining a taxi badge or a taxi license.
Well, true.
And having a vehicle being a taxi, it doesn't debar them from turning.
No, but the point I was making was it's not like they're profiting fully. So if they're an employee in one situation, they're not losing out to being an employee in another situation.
Yeah.
So, okay, we have to close up because we are anticipating the press conference. So stay tuned on the station for further coverage. And of course, you might be able to get even more up-to-the-minute information on our social media pages. It's just one of those things, folks. This is where we're at. So thanks to the callers. ASP Arun, thanks for joining me once again. I know this is technically a working day, but it's in the middle of all of the holiday stuff. But now your working day has probably gotten much more interesting.
It would have a lot of more demands on us as a section if this does unfold.
Yes.
And we would have to be up and running as usual. And we do operate 24 hours, so we are here. And we've been here to assist the entire TTPS in what they do. Just bear in mind as members of the public to try to utilize this time to keep safe and to stay off the streets unnecessarily. Stay out. The drinking and driving. I can't underscore how and emphasize how much it does affect everyone. The drinking and driving. Innocent people are losing their lives because somebody decided to drink at a party and didn't take the option of utilizing a taxi service or a sober driver. So if we could look at that would be great.
And folks, I'll just close saying this. If we have a state of emergency, or even if you're partying and the police stops you tomorrow night, please don't quarrel with them. Just don't quarrel with them. That's not the way to go. right? Obey instructions, you know, and if it's unreasonable, you could deal with it after the fact, make a complaint. Don't try to fight the police anymore, man.
Especially during a state of emergency.
Exactly. So with that said, as best as we can, make today as good as you can make it, even if we have a state of emergency starting from tonight, who knows? It's just one of those things. We are resilient when we want to be, so this should not hold us down, right?
Yeah.
Stay safe out there, folks. Remember your leader. Go ahead.
Nothing bars the members of the public from videotaping and whatever they have to do to keep safe as well.
Right.
Right. So they could also utilize that device and media to ensure their safety and security and whatnot. Right. And Happy New Year to members of the public and to you and your staff, Sean, and management at WSN in the upcoming year.
Thank you, SP Arun. Of course, we'll have a show tomorrow where so stay tuned for that. Hopefully, you stay to emergency. No, but this is your last appearance for the year, so of course, hopefully, who knows? The state of emergency might cause that to go kaput, but media might be allowed to still function. We'll see how it goes. With that said, folks, stay safe out there, as the SP said. We will see you hopefully, if not tomorrow, then next year, God willing.
Have a safe day.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
WESN.
The best for your baby is at dbesttoys.com. We have the best strollers, car seats, walkers, feeding accessories, playpens, cribs, clothing, and the widest range of brand name toys like Barbie, Hot Wheels, Nerf, LOL, Fisher-Price, Cocomelon, Intex pools, Amazon Fire tablets, HP and Gateway laptops, and the best bikes, scooters, skateboards, and ride-on. Visit us in-store at 7 Main Road, McBean, or shop online now at dbesttoys.com. That's dbesttoys.com. We have the best toys at the best prices.